factoring trinomials is kind of the standard way to do our factoring. And also factor by grouping is going to be another category that falls into what we do on this video. So this is just going to be some of the factoring techniques that we need to be able to do for polynomials. When you have a basic polynomial like this, and I say it's basic because the first term is just an x squared. There's two things that you have to have happen. You need to multiply to your last term and add to your middle term. So in this case, we need to multiply to -2, but add to 1. All right, I'm getting that from our last term and our middle term. So you look for a pair of numbers that's going to multiply to -2, but add to 1. And in this case, 2 and -1 will be the two answers. You might have to do a little trial and error here to figure out what numbers are going to work. But once you have those numbers, then you have the factors. This becomes x plus 2 and x minus 1, and you're done. Now it gets a little bit harder when there's a leading coefficient. When we have something like this one, 4x squared plus 39x plus 56, we got a little more work to do. Now, one thing you can do is just kind of guess and check, but most students don't like to do that strategy. So what we're going to do is multiply to our AC, our A and our C. Multiply those two numbers together. So we have 4 times 56, so that is 224. And then add to your B. Okay, your B is just this number here, so we're going to add to 39. It's going to be hard to figure this one out because I don't know things that multiply to 224 off the top of my head. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just go through the list. I'll start with 1 and 224. Then I look at 2. When I do this, 2 and 112. Right now, these are not adding to 39. I take 224 divided by 3. It's not a factor. 224 divided by 4. I get 4 and 56. I'm still not there. I know it's not divisible by 5 because it ends in a 4. But I'll go to the next one. 224 divided by 6, not a whole number. 224 divided by 7, I get 7 and 32. So notice I'm just going through my list. It doesn't take that long, but you might have to do 5 or 6 of these pairs. But once I have the right two numbers, look at this. I'm just adding them as I'm going along. 7 and 32 adds to 39. But when you have this particular type of polynomial, you don't get to go straight to your factors. What you'll have to do is you'll have to replace your B with those two terms that you just found, the 7x and the 32x. Then you factor by grouping. And factor by grouping involves finding the GCF of the first two and finding the GCF of the last two. The first two only have an x in common. The last two have an 8 in common. So I factor out the 8 there. Now from here, notice that the two parentheses were the same. That is supposed to happen. It has to happen. If you can factor those, that's one of your factors. And then the other one is just going to be the terms in front, the x plus 8. But that's your factor. That's all you have to do. So I really like this method. It always works, and you just have to do it a few times to practice it. So let's take a look at another one that uses this AC method. This next one is similar, but it has a negative in front, but that's not going to cause us too much trouble. We're just going to factor out that negative, which is going to change the sign of everything, but we're still going to process this the same way. And that is a 62z. There we go. I just don't want to write that 62z here. We have negative 7z squared plus 62z plus 9. Factor out the negative, changes all of the signs. But we'll still do that AC method. We have our 7 and our negative 9. So we multiply to negative 63, and then we add to the negative 62. So what's going on here? Well, if I do, since it is multiplying to a negative, I need to have one of them negative. And, sorry, been doing too much math today. There we go, -1 and 63. I'm trying to multiply to my -63. Notice here that those two add up to +62. I'm looking for -62, but that's an easy fix. If you get the right number but the wrong sign, just switch the signs. So I still have that negative in front, but I'm going to have my 7z, oh, there's a squared there, my goodness. All right, 7z squared, and we have plus 1z minus 63z minus 9. Now I'll do my factor by grouping. The first one only has a z in common, so 7z plus 1. And then this next set of terms, I'm going to take out a -9. If the term is negative, you do need to factor out the negative. That'll be 7z plus 1. And so we have the negative in front, then we have the 7z plus 1 common factor, the z minus 9 in front, and that's our final factoring. So factor by grouping is the same process. So I'm going to leave those factor by grouping problems, and I think we've covered everything for most of these. Just now to number 35, just because it has a GCF. Always be on the lookout for a GCF, and always be on the lookout for things being out of order. Notice here that really this should be 8x cubed plus 24x squared plus 32x. And I don't like having a negative in front, so I'm going to factor out the negative with that 8, and I'm going to factor out an x. Each of these terms is divisible by 8 and x. Now I have x squared minus 3x minus 4, and then we can keep factoring. So if your factors are out of order, just put them back in order, and then you can factor like normal. Sometimes in calculus, we get some weird factoring happening, and this is an example of a problem that would show up in a calculus problem. And factoring out this problem is actually a little strange, but I want you just to think, we've got an 8 and a 9. Those are our terms. We have an x minus 8 and an x minus 8 squared, and we have an x plus 1 squared and an x plus 1. I want you to look at what is in common with those three pairs. The 8 and the 9 have nothing in common, but I can take one of my x minus 8s, and I can take one of the x plus 1s. What that leaves me with is an 8, okay, from right here, from that 8 in front. I took out the x minus 8, so that one's gone. I took out one of the x plus 1s, but that leaves me with one more x plus 1s. Now go to the next term. I still have the -9. I've taken one of the x minus 8s, and I've taken all of the x plus 1. Inside, I can distribute this, where I multiplied the 8 and multiplied the -9. And so the final factoring of this is x minus 8, x plus 1, and then -x plus 80. So it's kind of a strange way to factor. It's not something that ever comes up in pre-calculus, but it will come up if you take a calculus course, and we'll review it then. But it's just looking at greatest common factors, where the factors were still factors.